So what that's done in the past is there hasn't been candidates running in these districts, actual aggressive campaigns, talking to neighbors and talking about the issues. So, we look back at some of these previous elections, whether it be in this district or in CD8, there hasn't been candidates. So the data is really not there, I feel. If you look at the data maybe in 2020, looking back at what Haral and I are doing now, I think that'd be more of a fair assessment. Just because her and I are campaigning, we're out there talking to voters, and oftentimes we knock on these doors and these people are like, I've never had a Democrat come to my door. And they've lived in their house for 10 years. And that's just wrong. And if we want to change our country, we need to make sure that we're running candidates in all districts and in solid campaigns and really working. And I understand that, ADLCC and the DCCC and the DNC doesn't want to put money into some of these districts that we're outnumbered voter registration wise. But, there's other things that you can do to help districts like this. You can volunteer time. You can have somebody phone banking. There's other things other than money that helps campaigns win. I know this district is not what the voter registration says because I've talked to Republicans that are sick and tired of this, our current representation on both the state and federal level. Judy Burgess really did nothing for Arizona's 22nd legislative district. And the person that's more likely going to come out of the Republican Party's nomination the end of this month is very similar. He's a legislator that is owned by ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council. And he's got the healthcare industry has basically been funding his campaigns, particularly like pharmaceutical sales, like Pfizer is one of his biggest donors. He's not a champion for the people. He's never gone out and talked to people at doors like I am. Republicans, when I've gone on their doors and knocked on their doors on accident, they're pretty impressed that I'm coming to talk to them because people from their own party don't even come talk to them.
And that's very similar to the kind of stories that we're hearing around the country. And it gives me a lot of hope that in fact we're going to be flipping seats up and down the ballot. And I think these state level races are so important and so often overlooked, which is, in part how we ended up with such huge Republican majorities in so many states, I think.
Well, absolutely. And Republicans have been going with this battle strategy for decades. You look back in 2008, that's basically when you saw the largest influx of money flood into our political system and the pushback on Obama. And the Koch brothers and ALEC really invested heavily in these state houses. And, it's worked for them. And what happens is these legislators end up running for other positions, like Debbie Lesko, for example, who is now an incumbent congressperson here in Arizona's 8th congressional district. She started off at the state level. These state level races are more important than the U.S. House. The U.S. House is important, but these state level races really, I think, control the direction of the country. I talk about like marriage equality, for example. That was passed through state houses prior to, the Supreme Court making the decision, but it led the way. And I think we're going to see something similar when it comes to the legalization of marijuana. The states are going to lead the way. Then finally, it's going to come down from the national level. And oftentimes you look at neighboring states, you look at automatic voter registration, and more states are doing that, neighboring states. So, they look at these, if it's working in particular regions, then it generally will get introduced on the national level, if it's successful. And the states kind of lead the way in that aspect. So they're equally as important, if not more important.
So you're running very much on a campaign that's issue driven, but you are a transgender woman, and that is something that sort of made some waves when you first announced that you were running for Congress in the 8th district. How is your campaign being received in that way by the people on the ground in Arizona? Is that something that people are talking about or thinking about, or is that sort of a non-issue, and the issues of education and healthcare and infrastructure and responsible gun ownership are those sort of the things that are really sort of taking center stage?
Well, most definitely the policies and where I stand are taking center stage, but the fact that I am a transgender woman has been brought up and is pretty known out here in Arizona. It hasn't been a focal point of the campaign, and I haven't really received many attacks from people on the right in Arizona when it comes to how I identify. And I think it's great that it doesn't get brought up very much, but it's definitely a part of who I am. And I think it kind of shows the perseverance that I have, and that I have thick skin, and I'm not afraid to say and do the things that need to be done, to make sure that people have a better life, because I had to do that myself. I had to muster up the courage, come out to my family, and possibly lose everything that I have, including my daughter, if her mother wouldn't have been accepting of who I am. I think it says something about myself as a person that I think would make me a perfect legislator, a really authentic person. And I think that's what we need in government is authenticity. We oftentimes get elected officials that say the right things and stick to the script, to get elected. Then once they get in there, they change. I think that's a thing of the past, and I don't think people want that anymore. And that's why they were so hungry for candidates like Bernie Sanders and, unfortunately, Donald Trump. People gravitated to both of those candidates because they brought something different to the table and a very populist message. And I think when you look at who I am as a person, identifying as trans, and my backstory of coming through poverty and working blue collar jobs like shoveling asphalt and replacing railroad ties, and that hits home with everyday Americans. And that's really, I think, what people want now, is just people that understand their concerns and really want to convey the community's concerns every day if they get into office. And so that's kind of where I'm at there.
Has there been a transgender representative in the Arizona state legislature before?
There hasn't. There was a trans woman who ran a few years back for the state legislature. I don't recall her name offhand, but she did run. So I won't be the first one to be on the ballot for the state legislature, but if elected, I will be the first representative that identifies as trans at the state house. I was the first trans person to make the ballot for a federal election, which was great. And we also have another trans woman running out here for the legislature. Her name is Daria Lohman. So we have a very diverse base of candidates out here: trans, many Latino leaders, African Americans. We have a wide range of people running for office, which is great because it's really a reflection of our communities. And we have an openly Muslim woman running for a U.S. Senate, Deidre Abood. It's really beautiful, all the candidates we have running in Arizona.
One of the things that comes up occasionally in our discussions with candidates, and is something I want to ask you about, is that the salary for a state senator is fairly low in Arizona. It's not full-time living wage kind of salary. So does that limit the kinds of people who can run for office for the state legislature? What are the sorts of people that you see in office right now in those kind of positions?
Great question. And they purposely made it that way. They purposely made it so it's basically impossible to be a working class person in everyday society, single mom, young families. It's made it impossible because you can't make it on that salary of $24,000, $25,000 a year realistically, after you pay the mortgage, electricity, put food on the table, and it's just near impossible. So what it's done is, the way that they've set it up is, you get a lot of retirees that are going down there and becoming our representatives, and not the working class people. So it's made it difficult and challenging. And that's something that I know that I'm getting into. When I decided to come out as trans, I was prepared to lose everything that I had, my house, my family, everything. And I look at it the same way with this. Belongings are just belongings, but making people's lives better that's priceless. And that's the opportunity that I have if I'm elected, is to make people's lives better. I'll find a way to get by on a low salary like that, because I know that what I'm giving to my community is greater than any personal belongings that you can own. I'll figure it out when I get there. And I know it's going to be tough, but it needs to be done, and we need actual representations of people in office. And that's what I'm ready to bring.
Well, if people would like to help out your campaign, how can they do that?
Well, they can do it a number of ways. You can go to westbrookforarizona.com. You can make a campaign contribution. That seems to be everything that all candidates ask for, because it's important. Our campaign's a people-funded campaign. I don't have any corporate donors that I can call to help me purchase palm cards so I can continue to knock on doors and give literature away. So I depend on small $27 donations and members. There's also a tab on there that's equally as important to a donation, if not more important, because it really showed that volunteers really make a team. With my last campaign, I think that's why we were so successful, is we grew a very large volunteer base. So there's a volunteer tab. If you can go on there, there's a couple questions. Just choose whatever you're comfortable doing, and we'll find a spot for you on the team. Anything. So if you're a writer, you can help with press releases. If you're a graphic designer, we can definitely use somebody to help make graphic designs, graphic images for our social media and literature. If you're a speech writer, we can use anybody on this team, more than just door knockers and phone bankers. So please jump on the site and drop a request to join the team as a volunteer, and that'd be great. That's all at westbrookforarizona.com.
And we will add a link to that to our website as well. And early voting has started already in the primary.
Yes, early voting started on the 1st. We are kind of unique here compared to some other parts of the Valley, and just about this first 2 weeks, we're going to know who the winner of our election is going to be in the primary. 90% of our ballots cast in our primary in February were in the first 2 weeks. So yeah, that started on the 1st. You can go to maricopa.vote if you'd like to find your nearest polling location or have questions on where your ballot's at. If you're an independent, you'll have to go on there and request a ballot. They don't get shipped to you automatically. You'll have to specify which party you plan on voting for, hopefully Democratic. You have to request it if you're an independent. And you only need to request it once. You don't have to request it again in the fall. There's an option on the bottom of the request form. Just check it and they'll mail you your ballot again in the fall if you're an independent requesting a ballot. A deadline to mail in your ballots, August 22nd, and last day of early voting is August 24th.
Well, we'll be watching the campaign closely as we get toward the end of August, and really want to thank you for coming on. This has been really great.
All right. Well, it was great chatting with you too. This was a great opportunity to talk to people throughout the country. And thank you for listening. And thank you again for having me as a guest.
CleanTheHouse.org was started by 3 generations of a family saddened and angered by the daily onslaught of Trump administration outrages and the complicity of Republicans in Congress. Together, the family formed a plan to turn the House blue. Researching the districts considered toss-ups or leaning Democratic, they identified 36 districts that together can take back the House. Through Act Blue, they made it easy to donate to all 36 districts in one swoop. For as little as $36, you can give $1 to each of these districts. Visit cleanthehouse.org and follow at cleanthehouse18 on Facebook and Twitter. Help support these 36 districts and tell everyone you know to do the same. Let's clean the house this November. Visit cleanthehouse.org, because you give $1. In this segment, I am here with Alexandra Chandler, who is running for Congress in the Massachusetts 3rd District. Hi, Alexandra.
Hello, Kelly. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. So I'm going to start with our usual first question, which is, can you just tell me a little bit about your background and why you're running for Congress?
Sure. I live here in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and I'm running for Congress because I thought that I'd be the best candidate to get things done for working class and middle class people in Congress. And the reason for that does go to my background, a little bit about myself. I was in the intelligence community for 13 years. I decided to serve after living through the 9/11 attacks in New York City. My then girlfriend, who is now my wife, was on a subway train under Lower Manhattan when the towers came down, and I spent a few hours in our Brooklyn apartment not knowing if she had made it. And in that few hours of time, I promised myself that if she came back, I would serve. In some way, I would serve. So I rejected the international corporate law path and joined the intelligence community. And in the 13 years that I was in the community, I saw what all kinds of different Americans across every possible division could